So what is the everything is figure outable mindset, and how can it be used to enhance and optimize personal and professional growth?
I'm going to dig in there and intro it by telling a quick story of how this came about.
Would love that.
So it comes from a spicy, tiny woman, 5'6", looks like June Cleaver, has the tenacity of a bulldog, cusses like a truck driver, my mom. She grew up in the projects of Newark, New Jersey, and really learned by necessity how to stretch a dollar bill around the block a few times. Both her parents were alcoholic, and she, as a little girl, made a promise to herself, like, someday I'm going to find a way to a better life. And one of my favorite memories as a kid was being in New Jersey at our kitchen table on Sundays, like clipping out coupons, because she was super passionate about teaching us all the ways that our family could save money. And one of the things that she also taught me was that brands at that time, if you saved up enough what were called proofs of purchase, you could get cool free things. Recipe book, utensils. One of her favorite possessions in the world was this little AM/FM transistor radio that she got from Tropicana Orange Juice for free. Wow. So it was shaped like an orange. It had a little red and white straw sticking out the side, which is the antenna. And I knew as a kid I could always find her somewhere around the house or somewhere around the yard listening to this little radio. And she loves music like I do, so it's all like Donna Summer and disco and all kinds of stuff. So one day I'm coming home from school, walking home, and I hear the little radio off in the distance. And I get closer to my house. The sound was coming from a strange orientation up above. And I look up and I see my mom perched on the roof of our 2-story house with this little Tropicana Orange radio next to her buns. And I'm like, what the hell is she doing in there? I'm like, Mom, are you okay? What's going on? I didn't see a ladder, I didn't see anything. And she yells down. She's like, Ree, the roof had a leak. I called the roofer. He said it was going to be at least $500. I said, screw that. I'm doing it myself. This is my mom. So another time I come home from school and I go into the house and I hear the little radio in the back, and it turns out she's in the bathroom, and I like push open the door and there's pipes sticking out of the wall and dust particles in there. It looked like a freaking bomb went off. And I was like, Mom, are you okay? What happened? She's like, Ree, I'm fine. She's like, some of the tiles had some cracks. I didn't want everything to get moldy, so I'm retiling the bathroom. Now you have to get that my mom is only high school educated. This is the 80s. So there's no Google, there's no YouTube, right? One day in the fall, coming home again, and this time I approached my house and something was different. Everything was dark. No sound. Lights are out. Now, in an Italian-American home, when there's no sound and it's dark, this is not a good sign. So I had this pit in my stomach. I was like, something's definitely wrong here. Go inside the house. Where's my mom? Where's the radio? Where's everybody? And then I start hearing these little clicks and clacks from the kitchen. And I tiptoe over, and I was afraid of what I might see. And I see my mom hunched over the kitchen table, which looked like an operating room. There was screwdrivers and electrical tape, and then in like 12 pieces was a completely dismantled Tropicana Orange radio. And I was like, Mom, are you okay? This is like your favorite thing. What happened? Is it broke? And she stops and she looks at me and she's like, Ree, it's fine. She's like, the antenna was a little off and the dial wasn't working, so I'm fixing it. And I stood back and I crossed my arms and I thought to myself, and then I said to my mom, I asked her the question I should have always asked, which was this, like, hey, Mom, how do you know how to do so many things that you've never done before, but nobody's showing you how to do it? And she looks at me and she says, Ree, what are you talking about? Nothing in life is that complicated. If you just roll up your sleeves, you get in there and you do it. Everything is figure outable. And Max, I kid you not, as a young kid, I was like, what? Like that phrase was like, everything is figure outable. Everything is figure outable. Oh my God, everything is figure outable. And so it was this philosophy that got imprinted in me because I saw it in action in her, and I saw it in my dad, small business. And so it became this driving force of my life. Not that I had all the answers, but that somehow they could be figured out if you just dove in and learned by doing.
I love that. So
it's really a simple idea, but what it's experienced, what it's happened for me in my life, and as I've shared it with other people, a lot of folks, especially really dear friends when I was coming out the book, one of my friends who deals with addiction, he was like, Marie, it's a great title, but can it really work with the hard stuff? What about addiction? What about loss? What about diagnosis and stuff like that? And I said, let me share this. So I had taught this to my audience for a really long time. They loved it. Then I test drove it on Oprah's stage. So she had this event called Super Soul Sessions, and it was the first time that I had really talked about this notion in a bigger public forum. And so they put that out in the podcast, and then we started getting feedback from a lot of people that had no familiarity with who I was or what I did. And this woman, Jen, wrote me this letter that changed my life. And she said, hey, Marie, thank you so much for your talk that you did. You know, this notion of everything is figure outable, it's actually something my mom has been trying to teach me my whole life. She's like, and I really loved it. But then something happened and I didn't know if everything was going to be figure outable. She said, my mom, who's like my best friend, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And all of a sudden, nothing seemed figure outable. But she said, I stepped back and I took a look deeper. And here's what I saw. I could figure out how to get my mom nursing care because she lived in a rural area. I could figure out how to get medical equipment to her home that she really needed. And this was the big thing. I could figure out how to find foods that she could actually tolerate so she could spend her last weeks on earth exactly where she wanted to be, at home, surrounded by friends. And so Jen said, thank you so much for sharing that talk, because even though her mom passed, it gave her this feeling of hope and possibility, and it changed both of their lives at a time when they needed it most. So everything is figure outable doesn't mean that we're never going to face really difficult things, because we all will. And we can talk about 3 simple rules that I think give people a mental container by which they can use this philosophy in a really practical, pragmatic way and not get lost in like fantasy things that, you know, you really don't care about figuring out right now anyway. So should we go through the 3 rules?
Yeah, well, I love that it's a mindset applicable to almost everything. I mean, even something as difficult as pancreatic cancer, which is something that I've experienced personally. My mom passed from pancreatic cancer, but yeah, even in those moments where it feels like, you know, it's all doom and gloom, there are still, you know, little candles to be lit, you know, whether it's, I don't know, supplying the best care for your loved one, or just bringing them, you know, foods that they really love and enjoy, you know, to brighten their day. Yeah, I love that. I love that mentality. It's so optimistic and auspicious.
Well, it helps us find any little crevice of hope, any little possibility that we can say, oh, what could we bring? What could we do? What could we ask for? How can we maybe show up differently given all of the facts of the situation? So let's walk through those 3 rules, because it really is, I feel like it gives me a good mental container whenever I'm battling stuff, because I use it every day.
Yeah.
So rule number 1 is that all problems or dreams are figure outable. Rule number 2, if a problem isn't figure outable, it might not be a problem. It might be a fact of life or law of nature, gravity, death. Rule number 3, and this is the big one, this is really important. You may not care enough to solve a particular problem or achieve a particular dream, and that is 100% okay. But find something that you do care deeply about and go back to rule number 1. So I think what that does is it helps us aim our time and attention and energy towards the things that we're really deeply committed to, and kind of not get lost in a little bit of, for lack of a better word, like mental masturbation, like, oh, you know, should I be able to figure this out? It's like, do you really want to? Because some things, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen in a day or a week or maybe months. It may take years or even lifetimes if it's a big, potentially social issue, you know, something that we're collectively trying to solve. But I think history has taught us that there are times in the world where we didn't think something was possible, like, for example, human flight, right? People are, that's crazy. And it's like, now we're talking about going to Mars. So I think the notion, the spirit that everything is figure outable is something that really fuels up our ingenuity, our sense of possibility, and helps us channel our gifts towards what we believe matters most.
When was the last time you had to use this mindset? Because when you're here,
God.
there's a certain like...
Yeah, so here's what happened yesterday. So I'm, you know, from New York, and it was early morning, and I'm flying out here, and I'm here coming to talk with you, and we're doing like some photo shoots and this, that, and the other thing. And I had taken great care to like pack up. I took most of Sunday, and I was flying Monday morning, and I'm halfway to JFK, and it hit me that all of my makeup, I forgot it. All of my skin, like all of the things that I just used to get ready for a photo shoot or whatever, I left it all at home. And I had the initial thought like, OMG, I'm effed, because it was just a quick schedule. I was like, oh man, I know this sounds really minor, but instead of having a stress meltdown, it was like, oh, let me start making the little plans just to get everything set up so that I could stay on time with all of my commitments. Do you know what I mean? And do what I need to do. That's like a tiny little minor life thing. But the major thing that was difficult is last year, and I might cry, so forgive me. My mom got really ill and almost died twice.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so she's, you know, my mom's a really important part of my life, and it was really, really difficult and frustrating on many levels, from the care of the hospitals and the medical system, as you know, can be really challenging to navigate. And then just the personal aspects. My dad too, they're both amazing and they're still here, but my dad, whose memory's been failing, the moment my mom was kind of like on the edge, his memory went and it was like, oh shit. My dad's slipping into dementia. I don't know if I'm gonna have my mom any longer. And it just turned my entire life upside down for about 6 months. And so the notion that everything was figure outable, I had to use it every day to like keep myself in a place of possibility and to keep myself going, okay, how do I keep my business going? How do I take care of myself to stay as grounded and healthy as possible? And then how do I show up for my family in a way and my brother, do you know what I mean? To keep figuring out how to keep it all going when it seemed really, really bleak. And I'll talk about this because my mom had a really severe mental breakdown. And it was so scary and so devastating, and nothing like that had ever happened before. And I remember that just feeling of like the doctors weren't getting it and no one was getting it. And so that's probably the most recent big thing where it held me every single day.
Wow, this was last year?
This was we literally just came out. So we're recording this right now. It's April. It was the first week in January where I felt like we kind of had my mom back, and it was a combination of some of the right meds and some grace and a couple of things where she's stable now. And, we're keeping everything crossed because life is such a bag of surprises. But yeah.
Wow. And doubly powerful knowing that your mom gave you like this mindset to begin with. Like it originated with her. Man. Well, let's take a step back. Who is Marie Forleo? Because I've been aware of your work for, I think, a decade at this point. I've known who you are for a long time at this point, but I know, your first book was about dating.
Yes.
Completely different,
totally
genre.
Yes.
But yeah, so how do you get started in this and build the empire that you've built?
So, my first job out of college was actually on Wall Street on the New York Stock Exchange.
Really?
And
wow.
Yeah.
You studied business in school?
I did. So I studied business because I only had clues. I think our society in general does a really poor job of preparing young people to identify what they're best at and then knowing how to potentially translate that into a living. I just don't think we've figured that bit out yet.
Right.
And I was definitely one of those people, as a kid, when people would say, oh, Marie, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was like, how much time you got? Because there was always 17 answers. It was like, I want to be an author, and I want to be a business person. I want to be an artist, and I want to be a dancer. And I would, the list would go on. And I guess people thought I would outgrow that, and I did too, but I didn't. So when I was on Wall Street, the thing that I loved, because when I was studying business in undergrad, everyone was getting ready to go to desk jobs. And I have a lot of energy, and I could not imagine myself sitting at a desk for 8 hours. I was like, I'm going to want to stick a fork in my eye. That I can't even do it. So the thing I appreciated about Wall Street, a couple things. One, I always knew, and this is a different story about growing up, but I wanted to make a lot of money, not because I like shoes or material things, but because of my history. I associated not having money with the loss of love and with a lot of stress and a lot of destruction of family. And having money, I somehow made this equation that I could use it to heal. And so I wanted to have enough so that I could take care of my family and other people and have that be nice and stable. And so Wall Street was attractive because you couldn't sit down and there was the potential to make a lot. 6 months into that job, I started hearing this little voice in my head that was like, Marie, this isn't who you are. This isn't what you're meant to do. This isn't who you're supposed to be. And I was like, shh. I was the first in my family to go to school. My parents busted their buns to even put me in school. So I was like, you can't just quit. You have healthcare, you have a paycheck. This is nuts. So I kept shushing that voice until one day I walked into work, and I remember, Max, I couldn't catch my breath. I felt physically ill. There's nothing wrong with me, but I felt so ill. And I told my boss at the time, one of the traders, I said, hey, can I go out and grab a coffee? And he's like, yeah, sure. And so I ran out, and I didn't go to get coffee, but I went to the nearest church, Trinity Church. I just graduated from Catholic University. So I was trained kind of in a crisis to look up and just ask for a little guidance. So I sat down on the church steps and I was bawling my friggin' eyes out because I felt like such a loser. I wanted to quit, but I didn't have a backup plan, and it felt wildly irresponsible, and that I was going to bring shame upon my family because I had been the first one to go to school. And so the first bit of guidance was call your dad. And so I whipped out my flip phone, which tells you that it's 1999. And I'm crying on the phone to him, and I'm like, Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I feel like I've tried to bring my game face every day. I hate working here. This is the worst, and blah, blah, blah. And he interrupted me. He's like, Ray, calm down. You've been working since you were 9. I'm not worried about you keeping a roof over your head or putting food on the table, but here's the lesson in life. You're going to be working for the next 40 or 50 years. You've got to find something you love. And if showing up at this job every day is making you this sick that you had to run out and you're crying to call me, you need to quit and find something you love. And Max, that was like this permission slip. Like, he didn't tell me how to find something I love, but just that I had to do it. And that was what I needed to kind of get out of there. And then I was honestly lost. I was like, okay, I'm very passionate about creativity. Like, as a kid, I wanted to be an animator for Disney, but I also love small business. And I was something intriguing about commerce. And so I was like, okay, what do I do? And the only thought that came to my mind was women's magazines. I was like, oh, there's a commerce side and there's a creative side. And I remember going to a little like headhunter, and I told him, I said, I'll take any job, entry level job. And so I got a job at as an ad assistant on the advertising side at Gourmet Magazine. Condé Nast, big publication. And I'm Italian American, so I love food. And I was so pumped because my desk was near the test kitchen, and they would bring me snacks like, hey, do you want to try? I'm like, I'll try anything.
Love that.
And so it was cool. It was a different environment. But then that voice came back again, and it started getting louder and louder. Marie, this isn't who you are. This isn't what you're most supposed to do. This isn't who you're meant to be. And I was like, oh, fuck, not again. I felt terrible. And so I stepped back and I said, okay, Wall Street was all about money, money, money. Advertising, very much still about numbers and hitting quotas. Maybe your creative side is starving. Maybe you should be on the edit side of a magazine. So I went to HR and I said, and I'll do anything. I'll take a pay cut, whatever it takes. Within a couple weeks, they got me a position at Mademoiselle, fashion magazine, edit side. I'm like, all right, this is going to be it. I'm going to be like going to fashion shows and working with product designers. This is going to be the most amazing thing ever. And I'm happy and I'm joyful, la, 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 la. Of course, after the novelty wore off, the voice came back again. Marie, this isn't who you are. And I'm at this point, Max, I was like, am I cognitively impaired? Like, do you know what I mean? Is there something wrong with me? Because I want to work. I have a really strong work ethic, but I keep wanting to quit every job, not because I think I'm a princess or something, but because there's this inner voice that keeps pushing me to say, this isn't it. And so at that time, I was at work one day, and I was on the internet, probably when I shouldn't have been. And I stumbled upon an article about a new profession at the time called coaching.
Coaching.
Life coaching. Now, to set the context, I read this article, and Max, something inside of my body lit up like a friggin' Christmas tree. It was as though when I read about this new burgeoning profession, the clouds parted and there was little angels with sunbeams shooting out of their eyes, and it was like, oh, like this is who you're meant to be. But I was friggin' 23. And so the voice in my head was like, this is the stupidest, cheesiest, awfulest thing ever. Who do you think you are to be a life coach? You've quit every job. You're tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and you're 23 years old. Who the hell's going to hire a 23-year-old life coach? You haven't even lived life yet. But I couldn't deny that there was something in there that made me feel different than anything I'd ever been exposed to. So I signed up that night for a 3-year coach training program, and I did it all by teleseminar because that's what you did back in those days. And I kept my magazine job. Fast forward about 6 months, I get a call from the HR department. They had a promotion for me at Vogue magazine. So this is my fork in the road. Do you keep the steady paycheck, healthcare, doing a job that has prestige, that sounds pretty cool, that people understand and know what you do? Or do you quit and do this weird ass life coaching thing that sounds like the cheesiest, stupidest thing ever that no one has heard of, that you have no clue how to run or start a business, but that feels righter than anything you've been exposed to? So I turned down the Vogue job. I went back to doing what I did in college, which was waiting tables and bartending. And I figured out how to build a coaching business during the day.
Oh my God.
So that was 23 years ago.
Were you ever diagnosed with ADD, ADHD?
Yes. A few years later.
Well, because you're, a natural born entrepreneur, but I find that a lot of people that gravitate towards entrepreneurship, that crave novelty, like it sounds like you did, have struggled, like academically. I know, that's been the case for me. Yeah.
No, that has been like, and the person who diagnosed me, he gave me such a gift because he told me, he's like, you have the gift. And I was like, what do you mean I have the gift? He's like, you have the gift of ADHD. It means you have a very special brain. And he, and so we talked about it, and he's like, he told me just, in terms of exercise and meditation and some of the things that I already had a part of my life, but they weren't steady at all because I was just, a lot of energy all over the place. But he's like, if you take really good care of yourself, this will be your greatest asset, not something that has to hold you back.
Wow.
And so that was a really good frame for me.
Wow. So you were waiting tables, you began coaching individuals, right?
Yeah. Oh, I coach everybody. Like talking about cats, like my friends was like, I'll coach your cat, dude. Like I just wanted experience. I just wanted to gain an ability to support people. And I knew I was only going to get that by volume.
Yeah. And at what point did the content empire begin?
So I learned pretty quickly, and this is another gift from my coach training. So they taught me two things that have changed my life. One was helping me understand the skill of coaching and how to work with people and partner with people to support them in reaching their biggest dreams. But then they also taught me this, which was a game changer. It doesn't matter how great you are as a coach. If you don't understand the business side of coaching, you'll never change anyone's life. So at that moment, something clicked and I was like, okay, I have to simultaneously train myself to be great in my craft, and I have to understand what it takes to be a great small business owner. And that means marketing and sales. And once I started diving into that world of marketing and sales, that opened the door to understanding like, oh, wait, doing the math, you can only coach so many people individually. How do you start to leverage that and impact more people's lives? And then I found myself really saying the same stuff over and over again. I was like, oh, so the dots started connecting. Like, I need to write this down. Oh, I can do group coaching. Oh, does that make sense? So, and then as those years were going by, technology kept advancing.
Yeah.
It was no longer just email. Then it was blogs. Then we had these flip cameras, which turned into YouTube. So it was just all this kind of great Venn diagram of layers.
Yeah. How do you, so today you've got this empire, obviously. How do you juggle having so many responsibilities? Like, how do you find time in the day for self-care?
Oh,
how do you
God.
make sense? Yeah.
So I've been really bad. Like I go in waves sometimes with my life. Like in times I'm really good at it. And times I fail really hard. And I think it was probably right after the book launched, actually, I'd pushed super hard on that. And even though like my show, a large portion of it is scripted because a lot of our Marie TV episodes, I used to like to do different sketches and stuff. And when you're writing comedy, like you can't just improv, you know what I mean? Like you have to produce it. And I just pushed really hard. And after the book, I found myself super depleted. And so these days, for me, I've really learned the lesson hard. Like my self-care has to come first. Taking care of myself has to come first because I can't push as hard as I did anymore. And it's not wise. Like I feel like I was really self-punishing and had super, super perfectionistic tendencies. And it wasn't always joyful. And now I'm like, dance comes first, meditation comes first. I'm sure you've talked about this a million times on your show. Morning pages.
No.
Are you serious? Oh my God, I get to introduce you to something.
Is that the artist way?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I've never done it.
Really?
But I'm like somewhat familiar.
Do you
just
like
force
writing?
yourself to write every morning?
No,
right?
you don't even force.
Oh.
It becomes super joyful. So I have a couple of like really fun special notebooks. I literally get so friggin' pumped to wake up because it's such a fun practice. And for me, it's a vehicle for unlocking what I like to think of as kind of a natural intuitive intelligence, like your natural knowing, your own inner guidance that's not based here, not based in your conditioning, not based in all of your insecurities or your self-doubts or your ego, but it comes from a wholly different place. And sometimes for me, when I've read back morning pages, it doesn't even sound like me 100%. It's weird. It's like my higher self somehow gets in there.
Channeling through you. Wow.
Yeah. And, I'm not the most, I'm a little woo-woo, but I'm very, very, very pragmatic and skeptical. So for me to be saying that, it's like, oh, all right, stuff works.
Yeah, same though. I can relate. So every morning you wake up and what? You just like write until...
3 pages.
3 pages.
So it's like 3 longhand pages. And it's super fun. I always, of course, because I can't do anything standard, I'm always extra. So I also write down like my top 10 goals for the year. Because of the ADHD thing, it's a focus tool. Like I had a different version of this when I was working on the book. I really wanted it to be a #1 New York Times bestseller. You can't control that. That's a friggin' black box. I mean, some people try and game the system. I was like, no, dude, if it's going to happen, I want it to happen organically because we did all the right things. So at that time, I wouldn't write 10 different goals. I would just write, I am a #1 New York Times bestseller 15 times in a row.
Wow.
And again, it might sound a little odd or crazy pants, but there was something about the focus of that and the ritual of that helped my nervous system.
Well, we've done a number of episodes recently, actually, on the neuroscience underlying manifestation.
Yes.
Which like sounds like this super woo-woo thing, but there's actually like legitimate science backing it.
Well, neurons that fire together wire together. So Hebb's law, we know that. And we know that our brains are neuroplastic, right? And so we also know that, especially in the world that we live in today, where people have so much trouble focusing, and if you have a brain that's slightly shaped like ours, you maybe have even a little bit of additional trouble focusing, something like repetition can really support you in having, on a very pragmatic level, oh, this is what I need to focus on today. What do I need to aim my time and attention to make these things real? Again, taking it out. I'm so curious to hear if you want to share anything about the woo-woo, or maybe not woo-woo aspects, but other kind of neuroscientific factors of what you've been talking about. But for me, it's so clear. If I write it in the morning, it then influences even more so what I'm going to say yes to or no to throughout the day. And it's just, you do that 7 days a week, every month it's like, it makes stuff happen.
It sounds like a meditation.
Yeah.
In a way, but with your eyes open.
Yeah. And I meditate too, because that's another thing that helps me not be totally bonker pants.
Is there a specific style of meditation you practice?
There's two that again, because I can't just do one thing all the time. So transcendental meditation has really worked for me. Dr. Joe Dispenza, some of his guided meditations, super awesome. Like when I feel like my brain needs something a little more, like wanting to listen to something else, I can throw one of his on.
People love him. I'm not that familiar with his work.
Oh, have you not done the stuff?
Yeah.
It's super fun.
Really?
Like, here's what I'll tell you a few things that I appreciate about, because I love personal development. I love science. I love learning new things. I love experimenting with new things. And I've been to a lot of different experiences over the years with different teachers and stuff like that. Here's what I really appreciate about Dr. Joe, because I've gotten to know him. He's like doing it for the work. Like, you go to his event, there ain't no VIP section. You can't pay more. Like, that shit does not fly there. It's like, you can't ask questions. I mean, there's his support staff around you can ask questions to, but it's like, we're doing the work. We're doing it from a scientific perspective, and that's it. There's like a simplicity to it that I really appreciate.
Yeah. I need to do a deeper dive into his work.
It's super fun.
He's got like mega fans all over the world.
Yeah. My suggestion, if you're up for it, like the kind of full 7-day retreat, again, for humans like us who are building and creating and investing and doing all these things, to take 7 days to spend that much time in a meditative state, and also really investigating the neuroscience behind it and the connection between energy and creation and your own body and its ability to heal. Like, I feel like, Max, you would friggin' go nuts. Like, you would love it.
I'm so down.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Okay.
How do you prime your brain to focus on things that you find otherwise boring? Because I know things that are boring, people like us struggle with, right? Like,
Yes.
I can't focus on something that I'm not obsessively passionate about.
So, like, give me an example for you of something that you feel like you should be focusing on, but it's not exciting.
Well, for me, I actually find the business side of what I do to be incredibly tedious, and I hate it.
And when you say the business side, is it like contract? Give me some color onto the specific.
Like all the like really boring technical, like creating like a legitimate business, the infrastructural, operational, administrative aspect of things.
Great. The operational administrative, perfect. So that stuff, I remember there was a point in my business journey, I think I was probably like a little over 10 years in, and the business like finally started making money. You know what I mean? I felt like I basically had side gigs for the first 7 years of my business, because also I was a Nike elite athlete and dancer, and I was teaching fitness all around the world. And so I was doing a bunch of things at once. So I was knowingly slowing down my quote unquote progress, because I was so friggin' jazzed to be able to do all these things that I loved. So when I finally stopped teaching dance and doing all these other things and said, okay, I'm going to go 100% in on this business, and everything started working and making money, I basically stretched myself so thin that all the joy started getting sucked out. I was like, oh my God, shit's finally working, but I'm exhausted, and all the stuff that I used to love, I don't love it anymore because I'm so burnt out. And I realized how badly I needed to find an ops person, how badly I needed to grow my team with people that were really good at the stuff that I suck at. And I was so insecure because I'm like, well, maybe I'm a kind of okay coach, but I'm an awful entrepreneur. Like, I'm not meant to be an entrepreneur because I can't hack with all those things. And it took me like a year or two, but I found a person who's still with me today, who's my VP of operations. It's her genius zone. Like, all this shit that you're talking about right now.
Yeah, that I hate, yeah.
My brain is not configured like that. And so for me, it has been a game of surrounding myself with people. And I know we hear this all the time, but like, I have such a visceral experience of it, who have such different strengths than I do.
Yeah.
And they kind of look at what I'm able to do and they think like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm like, I don't think it's amazing at all. But I look at what they do and I'm like, bowing down, like I'm not worthy. So for me in the business, physically, I won't be able to do stuff that I really can't stand for long. Like, I can gin it up and get through something for a greater cause, but only in short spurts, if that makes any kind of sense.
Do you utilize any tools like to facilitate, the process, like caffeine? Do you consume caffeine?
Oh,
Yeah.
I love caffeine. I try and cut myself off before like 11 or 12 noon.
Smart.
Yes. I'll tell you, in more recent years, like when I was in college, I was a party girl. So, I mean, mushrooms and ecstasy, but I was a club girl.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
that.
So I was all over the place and it was mostly recreational use. And again, it was a damn good time. And I was like, praise be. It was awesome. Bless younger Marie. You were badass. This stage in the game, microdosing for me, not during work hours, but if I'm either on a retreat or even just honestly at home over the weekend and I feel like my brain is going so fast or there's a lot of intensity, or especially with what the last 6 months were with my family where there was so much trauma and so much heaviness, like psilocybin microdosing really has helped me go like it almost feels like a resetting, like a clearing of my cache. Not often, but when, for me, I'm very in tune with what feels like it's calling me. And if I feel like, oh, it's time for that, then I'll do it.
I find psilocybin to be like a really powerful creative lubricant. Like if I'm ever feeling creatively blocked, I find it to be super effective, like to do like a microdose. Not suggesting that people go out and try this for themselves necessarily, but for me, it's been super effective.
Yeah.
What about at night when it comes to turning off your brain? Do you struggle with that?
No, I feel like
well?
I do sleep. I sleep pretty well. Like my partner, Josh, we've been together for 21 years. God bless him. This poor man, like he has so much trouble sleeping. And so he's like, I think you sleep amazingly. I feel like when I was in my 20s and 30s, I slept even deeper like a rock. Like I'm one of those people who's like, okay, bye Max. Like, you know what I mean? And then I'd be like, hey, it's the morning. And I don't know what the hell happened for the last 8 hours. Now I feel like I bounce up maybe between 3 or 4, but I'm still a pretty good sleeper. I think that just with age and maturity, it's gotten better.
Interesting. It's so important. I mean, it's like it is the tide that lifts all the boats in your harbor, sleeping well.
Yes.
When I'm underslept, I mean, the world just takes on this pallor of, despair and
I try not to make decisions from that place. Like there's times if I didn't sleep well, like I realize now I can't do red eyes anymore. That will F me up for like 3 or 4 days. Like, whereas I feel like, again, like in the party analogy, going out and having, a banger of a night, be like, all right, fine. The next day, hydrate up, we good. Now it's like, dude, those days are gone. Same things with red eyes. I'm like, that takes me 2 or 3 days of recovery from a sleep perspective. And I don't want it. I can't afford it.
Yeah. How do you take any specific steps to optimize your sleep? Are you like one of these like hyper optimizers? Like, or is that?
No, you know what? I have an Oura ring on right now. I was talking about it with Kelsey on my team. I've actually wanted to throw this thing against the wall a bit because I felt like, first of all, one of the things it tracks is stress. And I was looking at my readings and like, I know what my schedule is. Like, I know I'm like, oh, I just did, a fitness class. Oh, I just talked with my best friend. Oh, I just did this and that. And it's telling me I have like basically 47,000 stress spikes in the day. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. And then it gets me in my head thinking that I'm way more terrible than I am. So I'm not a hyper optimizer. I definitely believe in data. I think personalized medicine is the way of the future. And I believe that everyone should understand their own inner metrics, especially as, again, you start getting past 30. It's like, you got to pay attention to shit. And you have to understand genetically what's happening. You have to understand your risk factors. You have to understand how to fuel yourself and make sure that you're not creating downstream effects for 50, 60, 70-year-old you that you would later regret.
Absolutely.
Right. So those kind of things are important. But I do think, at least for someone like me who can get obsessive at times, tracking too much data and it just feels like it steals the fucking joy out of life.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I feel like it, and it also subverts your own like subjective experience.
Yes.
Like, what if the ring tells you that you didn't sleep great, but you wake up feeling super refreshed? And
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and sometimes it'll be, like, let's say it's after we cooked a great dinner. And
your ring is like gaslighting you.
Oh my God. It's total. And it was telling me, like, oh, you went to bed at 7:30. I'm like, dude, I was actually on the couch. Do you know what I mean? Watching Curbed, or, like that was not me going to sleep at 7:30. That was me like relaxing.
Yeah, I get it. Do you keep like, because you are a good sleeper, do you like, dark bedroom?
Oh my God.
Like,
yes. Yeah. So I definitely do. I'm pretty adamant about this, only because I've discovered how awful it is if I don't keep these things in line. So like in New York City, so we have the same apartment we've had a very long time, and a lot of buildings in New York are old, and we happen to live in an old building, which we love.
What neighborhood are you in?
What'd you say?
What neighborhood are you in?
West Village.
West Village, nice.
Yeah. And so a lot of buildings in New York are fucking hot. Like in the middle of the winter, it's like the steam comes on. You can't turn it off because it's the whole building.
It's the whole building, yeah.
Yes. And so I have to have the windows open. It has to be like between 63 to 66. Like, I like it cool.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have a place out east, like we'll just like, let's take it down to like 55.
Wow.
Yeah. Like but it feels so invigorating. So
you got a big thick blanket. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah, it feels good. Definitely having all darkness. I have a little eye mask just in case. Those two things. And sometimes there's this supplement. I don't know who makes it. It's called Neuromag. So a little bit of magnesium in there. That is good for me sometimes too. But besides that, I'm pretty simple.
Love it. Yeah, if I'm having one of those days where I can't turn off my brain, which is not often, but occasionally it does happen, I find like a little microdose of, and I'm not a THC fan generally, but I find that like a little like weed gummy before I go to sleep. It's better than a pharmaceutical. People might hate on me for copping to that, but I think it's like it's a fairly safe low dose, and it's pretty effective.
Well, listen, I think for people, like, again, I was talking about how Josh has had so many challenges sleeping, and we've gone through, like, you should see the little tincture closet that we have, next to his bed for all of his different things, because he needs it, because sleep is so important. So I don't think nobody should be hating on anybody for having the wisdom to experiment with whatever they need to support their bodies and getting the sleep that's necessary.
Exactly. So what's next for you? Because I know Everything is Figure Outable. His book came out a couple of years ago. It's still a new, fresh, wonderful, beautiful book. But yeah. What are you these days like?
So yeah, there's a couple things. There's one thing that I created most recently. It's this experience called Time Genius, because I was falling down hard on my own productivity habits and finding so much exhaustion and frustration, and all of my usual tricks and tools between meditation and eating right and sleeping and praying and journaling, like they all kind of weren't working. It's like, wait a minute, this is weird. So Time Genius is really this beautiful science-based evidence-rooted toolbox to help people who struggle with overwhelm, feeling like there's never enough time, and who are starting to feel crushed by their own ambition and success, to kind of rewrite that ship. For me, I started all of this, and I always wanted my business to be joyful and freedom rich and to have spaciousness. And then a couple of years ago, I was like, it's not feeling that way anymore. And I'm feeling like I'm drowning under this monster that I created. So I was like, there's got to be a way out of it. So Time Genius was something that we created. It's really, really fun.
Is it like a course?
It is a course. And it's really cool because we get people through it in 5 days, and we've had folks that go in there who've been to like the stress doctors. Do you know what I mean? And nothing is helping them. And then they do Time Genius, and I call it an inside out program, because shifting your inner narrative around time and your own time thoughts and beliefs really impacts your behavior and how you experience it. And it's not bullshit. It's real as real can get. This one woman, after she did 5 days in our program, she went back to her stress doctor, and stress doctor was like, what are you doing? Everything is different. And she was like, I did this 5-day program.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's so cool.
It was really neat.
What about for people that are that have trepidation about taking the leap to entrepreneurship? Because I mean, the job market's pretty tough today.
Yeah.
From what I hear.
Yeah.
One of my brothers just left his job. He wasn't happy, and you know what I've gleaned from both of my brothers actually, who are in that corporate world, is that the job market is like incredibly difficult, and like. Even if you ultimately end up landing a job, like who wants to work for somebody ultimately for the entirety of their lives, right? There's like a ceiling and it's not fun, and it's like, yeah. But then again, like taking the leap to entrepreneurship can be scary.
Yeah. So 2 things I want to say about that is, one, I think that there's a lot of reshaping of our work culture that's happening right now. And I think it will continue to happen. And I think that's a really good thing. Mm-hmm. So like in our company, I shut the company down for 2 weeks in the summer and 2 weeks over the holidays because I want my team, we're all virtual, so we're all distributed, but I want them happy as motherfuckers. Do you know what I want them happy and feeling great because we create so much awesome stuff together. So I'm working, and I know many entrepreneurs are, like, how do we create these cultures and environments in a very real way where people don't feel like they're like, ugh, this sucks. So that's one piece. The second piece, though, in terms of entrepreneurship, I think that you have to really understand your risk averseness. So here's what I mean by that. I've met people over the years, and I'm curious how you would identify yourself. You're going to thrive if you quit your job and you're like, okay, now I need to produce, right? Like I need to go and sell that X, Y, or Z. This is what's going to keep food on the table. And you need all that pressure behind you in order to perform. So you might like risk. I, on the other hand, am very risk averse. So especially for me starting my business, I was like, what could be more sad and pathetic than a desperate life coach who needs clients? So that's why for me, not only was my bartending and all the different side jobs that I did, it was a way for me to have the work be pure and to have the energy not be that of desperation so that I could really focus on crafting this business. Even if it was going to take me longer, which it did, I knew I was building on solid ground. And there's actually some research to support that entrepreneurs that start, let's say, a side hustle or they keep a part-time or a full-time job are 33% less likely to fail because there's some cash flow coming in. There's some measure of stability while they're building towards something. So whenever I'm talking with people about whether or not they should or how should they, when do I know to take the leap, I'm like, I think self-awareness is the most important foundation to know, are you that kind of person that when you're painted into a corner, you are going to produce results? Like that's when you rise up and you make shit happen. Or if you have that kind of financial pressure breathing down your neck, do you crumble? If so, keep your day job or get a bridge job, that I like to call it, somewhere you can show up, have integrity, do some work, get some money, and then spend the lion's share of the rest of your time building your thing forward.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I remember back when I was getting started doing, with the book writing and the podcast, there was a period of a few years where I wasn't really making any money, certainly not enough money to live from what it was that I aspired to do ultimately, which was podcasting and writing and content creation. But I had an apartment in Los Angeles. I had moved to New York, and so I had this apartment in Los Angeles that I was living in, and the rent was like super cheap at the time. It was like $1,200 a month or something crazy like that. And I remember I would illegally Airbnb it from like across the country, no less, which was incredibly difficult to do. But I knew that it was a nice little cushion where every month I was like making, I forget what it was. It was like I was making an extra $2,000 a month, which, I had dramatically cut all my life costs.
Yep.
Which I think is a big part of it as well. Like cut cost.
Yes.
If you can. I mean, obviously people with families is going to be more difficult for some than others.
Yeah,
I was like a single dude.
Totally.
But yeah, like that kept me afloat, like you don't always have to do, you can cut corners sometimes.
It's important, so I have this program that's called B School. So it's online business school for modern entrepreneurs that want to make money and make a difference. So we've helped over 80,000 people start and grow their own businesses. So I've had a lot of perspective.
I've heard amazing things about that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we've been doing it for a really long time, and it's super fun because I get to kind of look over and see all these incredible creative humans get their thing off the ground or take it to the next level. And so I wanted to tell a story. There was one couple, they were in Brooklyn and they wanted to start this business, but it was kind of risky the way that they wanted to do it. And there was no way that they could maintain their lifestyle in Brooklyn, which was expensive, And so what they did was they moved to another country and they said, look, this may not be forever, but they did a little, kind of taking a page out of the classic Tim Ferriss geo arbitrage for the moment, moving to a developing country where they had great internet. The cost of living was literally a fraction of what it was in New York. And what that did is it gave them so much leeway to really experiment as business owners and know that so I was like, there's so many creative ways that, and again, everyone's circumstances are different, but if you take the everything is figure outable philosophy and say, what is another way to look at this? What's another way I could achieve this? And to your point, for anyone who's single, and if you don't have a ton of responsibility quite yet, or you're just at a stage in a season of life where you're just responsible either for yourself or a few people, it's like simple, cut back the cost, really. Because it's like, for me, I've had no money, been in tons of debt, had lots of money. The simplest stuff still makes me the happiest. Like I remember the first time I challenged myself on a trip to Italy to my friends were making fun of it. They're like, you always stay, I always stay in simple. I'm a fairly simple human. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try and stay in a fancier hotel. Cause I thought, well, maybe do I have these limiting beliefs about what I deserve? Just exploration stuff. And it wasn't breaking the bank, but it was I can totally afford this. And I stayed in this hotel that had the 5-star reviews. You know what I mean? This is going to be the best thing ever. Max, I was so not impressed. I was like, can you get me back to simple, rustic Airbnb where, you know what I mean? It's so my point is that sometimes our lifestyle creep, we've just gotten comfortable and used to it, but we don't really need it. It's not the stuff that matters most.
It's so true. What is your relationship with materialism?
Okay, so I'm going to be very transparent here. And this is something that there will be a program, a book around this. I love money. I love it. I'm not apologizing for it. I don't love it over people, but I have discovered in my life that money can be used as such a force of good, and also that there's not a scarcity of it. And that as a culture and a collective, there are so many damaging, toxic myths that have been passed down to us that create so much pain and frustration and shame, and they're completely unnecessary. And so I get really excited about it because I like cracking people open that they can have whatever they want in this area. And we just, again, it's kind of like careers. Just growing up, we just have very little education about finances in general. You asked about materialism. I like quality over quantity. So this is an example. So we have a place out in Eastern Long Island, and it was originally an old one room, almost like a fishing hut. And we had gotten it a couple of years later when someone had bolted on this tiny little loft, and then someone had bolted on a tiny little bathroom. And so it would be our kind of summer place that we would go to. And it was super simple, but it feels like you're in the trees. It's kind of like a tree house. And I looked around because Josh and I needed more space. We both work from home. He's an actor and I'm loud as fuck. And we're both, do you know what I mean? It's like we were on top of each other. We're like, we're going to kill each other. And so we recently completed this renovation, and I was like, we don't want to lose the old funkiness of the house, and we don't want it any bigger than it needs to be. So we just kind of built it out, but we used the best materials. So rather than having a 10,000 square foot, which that would just make me crazy because there's too much it's a lot of house for me. It's not my desire. This is just a little bit bigger than it was, but it's just the marble from this one place in Italy or this craft maker from here. So I like quality over quantity. So I like really beautiful, artful things that feel like they have some soul, or that they were made by people who really care about their craft. I think fashion can be fun, but it's I have so many other things on my mind. So materialism is not a thing that's big on my list. Books are my obsession. So Josh always he's more books. I'm I love learning. So books are probably the thing I spend the most money on.
You have a library?
I do. I have several of them, and I have to always keep, because of what we do, I'm sure you experience this, people send you a lot of books.
Yeah, a ton.
Right?
Too many.
So I have a lot of books that come in, so then I give them to different people and to different organizations. And then I keep the ones, I go back and I reread a lot of books again and again, because I always find that there's something new that I missed.
Yeah, I love that. I relate to the whole quality over quantity thing. I love buying items that have heritage.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
a pair of shoes, and the shoes might not necessarily be that remarkable, but you know that they're like made in this one small town in England where they've been made for the past 150
Correct.
years, you know?
Correct. Yeah. During this, so the renovation that we did took a really long friggin' time. But one of the things I had the most fun with was finding antiques and finding stuff that was vintage. And it was like, oh my God, these incredible sconces that were from Italy from the 50s. I'm like, must have them, you know, so stuff like that. That for me it gives me a lot of joy, because I also feel like your environment impacts how you feel, how you think, and how you create.
Yeah.
So for me, again, it's not about the size or a bunch of crap, but it's like, is this piece artfully made? Does it have a soul to it? Is there history and character to it? And if so, I'm like, it's mine.
Hell yeah. I wouldn't ever describe myself as a minimalist. Like I don't let the things that I own define me.
Yeah.
I don't let them own me.
Totally.
You know, and I place the value of my relationships over the things that I own,
Of course.
like as you alluded to. But yeah, I like owning stuff. And it's funny how people differ in this capacity. Like my middle brother doesn't, or actually neither of my two brothers like buying clothing, for example. I love buying clothing. I'm into fashion to some degree. I'm like a little bit of a sneakerhead. I like owning, I bought once I started making money and I could afford the guitar that I always wanted.
Yes.
I bought that guitar.
Yes.
And now I have it sitting in my living room and I love it. Every time I look at it, I'm like happy that I own it. Yeah, I definitely like owning it, but it's important to maintain an appreciative relationship with the things that you own,
Yes.
and to make sure that they have sentimental value and you're not just like buying frivolous, spending frivolously.
Yeah, no, I can't stand that. And I have this experience physically. Remember I was telling you about the story on Wall Street where I showed up and it was like physically I was getting ill.
Yeah.
So I also have that weird relationship with clutter. Josh will know it well. He's like, oh, your eyes are glazing over. I'm like, too much clutter, because we don't live in big places. And I like that because it requires that we be really intentional about what we own, which means that I am constantly sifting through and simplifying and going like, oh, how can we make this even more peaceful? How can we make it more artful? How can we make it more intentional? And again, just, you're on the planet for a couple of decades. You just accumulate stuff. That's what we do.
Do you purge regularly?
Yes. And I love it. Like I love the energy surge that comes from getting rid of things and from getting stuff. And it's like, I'm in the middle of Manhattan. So I have incredible organizations. I put stuff in a bag. I march down the street. I'm like, here you go. If the stuff's in great kind of use, someone else will have joy and beauty from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good.
I love that. So you've got this new course you're working on helping people better manage their time.
That one's done. So Time Genius is existing.
That's
completely done. There's a couple other things in the hopper. One of them that I've been fascinated with is because I've helped so many people start businesses they love. And because for me, you can't really separate business from life, or at least I can't. So the next thing that we're going to be creating is something where I want to help people not just have their dream business, but their dream life. And how do you do that in a way, especially if you don't want investors and you don't want to necessarily be a bajillionaire, like meaning you're not wanting to be the next Elon Musk. You're like, oh, I want to run this really artful, beautiful business, and I want to have time to travel and to be with my family or to do some hobbies. Like freedom and spaciousness, those are big values for me. And I find a lot of people in my community want that as well. And they're like, how do I have impact, but also not have my business like drain me? So I want to just take a nap all the time.
Yeah.
So we're creating a space where we can do that. One of the things I think is my superpower is helping people find clarity and then building systems and structures to make it happen and to make it, just because those are the things I need to do for myself because I'm like this.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, how do I have people to play with? And doing it from a mind-body connection place, because for me, dance has also been transformative. There's actually a new study that came out. I don't know if you saw this, but dance was actually more impactful than SSRIs.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
Did you see that?
Yeah. It was like a meta-analysis.
Again, this is not for people to go off your meds if you're on meds. That's great, but it was so exciting for me because dance has literally been one of the most transformative forces in my life. It's something anyone can do at any age. You don't need to be good at it. But there's this magic that happens when you combine movement and music and your own body. I think it opens up channels that you can't get to just living here. And I think it's a language of connection and like downloading whatever's next for you in a way that nothing else touches. And again, I lift weights. I love lifting heavy weights. So I do all kinds of different things, but there's a special magic about dance. And so I'm going to pull that into this next experience too.
Are you a gym girl? Like, do you go to the gym and...
I like group fitness classes because I love not being in charge and having some, like I'm in charge so much of my life that I'm like, oh, it's so great to go and have these great instructors tell me exactly what to do. So there's this place in Manhattan called Liftonic. And you go, it's 45 minutes. It's like going into a dirty dungeon, which I love because I was a Gold's gym girl back in the day with like big, long French manicured nails and like super tan. I can't even believe that I am not a leather bag by how much I tanned as a Jersey girl. So anyway, Liftonic is like going into a dungeon. You lift really heavy weights. It's just a bench and it's 45 minutes and it's amazing. And then I also really like yoga because that's great, the flexibility aspect. And then dance is like my holy grail.
When it comes to food, is there like a specific dietary pattern that you follow?
Yeah. So I just, after that whole thing happened with my family, it was like right at the tail end of that my entire gastro system went offline. And I was like, WTF, what's going on? It was the most, like, it was definitely stress.
Yeah.
You know Dr. Mark Hyman?
Yeah.
So Hyman's my functional doc. And so I was like, dude, you got to help me. I was like, what's going on? And he put me on, do you know AIP?
Yeah.
So he put me on AIP for 2 weeks. That
autoimmune protocol.
Yes. And I was like, oh my God, can't really have much, but it reset everything. I feel like my microbiome just got thrown off. So now at this moment, I'm primarily clean protein and a lot of veggies, but no beans and no grains. So pretty paleo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the paleo diet. I think it's like the emphasis that it places on food quality.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's for right now, for what I went through, like that past little period was so incredibly painful, like emotionally and physically and everything going on, that I'm so grateful. I'm like, oh my God, I have simple choices and I feel really good. This works.
Yeah. I mean, food, it's not necessarily, I wouldn't consider it a cure-all, but a healthy dietary pattern can certainly support your brain when you're going through it,
Yes.
Like I remember when my mom was really sick, so making time for self-care and prioritizing, a healthful diet. At the very least, it's like, it's like a security blanket, I mean, who knows if it's even doing anything psychologically, but it's, you're like reducing the decision fatigue when it comes to like deciding every meal what you're going to eat. And
yes.
And obviously it stands to reason that by giving your brain the micronutrients required for optimal functioning, that it's going to, like conceivably not make things worse.
100%.
Possibly make things better.
I think the thing that was really difficult for me to understand, so I can't have gluten anymore. And that was it was honestly a big thing for me because I grew up eating a lot of pizza, a lot of pasta. That was just my culture. And I love it. And like, having like a big chunky piece of bread with olive oil is like, oh, joy.
It's like in your DNA.
Oh my God. Yes. So it was actually right after the book that after looking at a blood test, a doc was like, is it possible you have celiac? And I was like, I can't, there's no way I got sick. What are you talking about? Like retest that. And then it turns out it was like, I don't have celiac. However, I just have a really big gluten sensitivity. So I was like, oh, wow. And I don't think I knew up until that point that your microbiome can change and that things that, your body maybe used to be able to tolerate or you just lived with the symptoms and you thought that was normal. All of a sudden it's like, nope, your body's like, we're going to change. There's going to be a little evolution here of how you're going to do things. So I feel like for me, I have to stay flexible because it seems to be in a state of flux.
Yeah. And you also travel a lot, so keeping a flexible mindset I think is probably helpful.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So as not to drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, no, that was that thing. It's just like I don't think I'm the person that should pay attention to every metric all the time. Like that'll take me down a not good rabbit hole. Same thing with food. It's like if I'm eating aligned with what is going to really make me feel my best 99% of the time, awesome. Am I going to go for perfection? No, doesn't work for me.
No, progress over perfection.
Yes, baby.
I'm trying to think of who turned me on to your B school. Was it? Do you know Michelle Promaleko?
Yes.
Does that name ring a bell?
Oh my! Her and I were just in Costa Rica last year.
Oh, were you?
Yo, yeah.
I think
Michelle
like
and I.
15 years, like 10 to 15 years ago or something like that.
When she was at Women's Health or Cosmo?
When she was at maybe Yahoo.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like way back in the day. Was B School out back then? Like
yes.
That was like
B School's been out for like 15, 16 years.
Yeah, I mean, this was like before I was making any money. I was living in New York.
Oh my God,
yeah,
yes.
Cut costs and whatever. And she was like, "You've got it. You should like sign up for this."
Oh my God.
But I don't even think at the time I didn't have the money to sign up. You know, I was like, "This is a big investment." But
yeah.
But she like spoke so highly of you and the course and everything, and I'm sure it would have been, I'm sure it would have accelerated. I learned everything by myself.
Yes.
I had to boots on the ground. But,
Totally.
I'm sure signing up for that would have helped cut some corners. But what a small world.
Yeah, it is a small, and it's great. I always love that. I love looking back and seeing that there's so many people that the circles then intertwine. It's kind of nice. And I think about moving forward too. I was thinking about that this morning in bed. I was like, there's people that have been creating and doing stuff for a while, and it's kind of exciting to think into the future and think like, oh, I've got friends that we know each other's work, and like, what's the next decade going to look like, and what's 15 years from now? It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is wild. Michelle she came on as an executive producer of my documentary, Little Empty Boxes, which I was mentioning to you offline.
Yeah.
Comes out in April. So she's like a super close friend. I've known her for years. She's always been very supportive of my work.
Well, then we're all going to have a meal when you come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing. Well, thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was so fun.
So fun. I've got one last question for you, but before we get to that, where can people find you online? How can they support your work?
Yes. So on all the socials, it's at Marie Forleo. We've got hundreds and hundreds of Marie TV / the Marie Forleo podcast episodes at marieforleo.com or on YouTube or all those places. Everything is figure outable. I think it's in like 34 languages or something. So if you're into books or audiobooks, you can go grab that. And then, if you're on the socials or wherever, you'll hear about whatever we've got coming up next.
Love it. What does living a genius life mean to you?
Living a genius life means listening to the voice within and expressing your very special, unique gifts in only the way that you can.
Beautifully put. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.